Welcome to the Uncontested Investing Show, presented by REI Inc. magazine and sponsored by RCN Capital. Each week, we focus on bringing you candid convos from the best in the biz. Here's your host, Tim Harridge.
Welcome back to the Uncontested Investing Show. I'm Tim Harridge. Thank you for coming back. Today, I'm joined by a good friend and mentor of mine, Eddie Speed. Eddie, thanks for being here.
How you doing?
Man, if I was any better, I'd be you. So, Eddie, I met you for the first time at the Aereo meeting at the Doubletree Hotel in Dallas when I first got out of the Marine Corps. And you were selling a book called Streetwise Seller Financing. You were the first real estate author I'd ever met. And I was awestruck, too. I realized you were just a normal guy. Why don't you just take a minute and just tell a little bit about yourself?
Well, I started buying seller finance notes. I started with my father-in-law in 1980. And seller financing became a really big thing because of inflation, right? High rates. And so that's how I got started in the business. My wife and I married in 1982. We kind of came to the big city of Dallas-Fort Worth to buy notes. And by the time I met you, I had set up the note system for home investors and had a whole era with our old friend Ken D'Angelo and all that. And so by then, I had spent about 10 years, this is around 2000, I spent about 10 years showing real estate investors a formula of how to make seller financing. Now, I did that for my own selfish reasons. They could sell their notes to me for top dollar. But that really has become really our thing over the years is, how to do it correctly so that you're making the best product. Whether you're going to keep your note or sell your note or whatever, that's how it works.
It's important to do things right. So, Eddie, every week I start with what I call the bottom line up front, the bluff. And when I was in the Marine Corps, I used to brief generals, and they would always say, if the general, never bury the lead. If the general has to get up and leave, like in the first, couple minutes, he's got to know the most important thing. So imagine someone just dialed up this podcast, they're on their way to work, but they got to pull over and get gas, and they don't start it back. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to tell the listener the most important things they need to think about, be doing, or maybe avoid in today's market. So Eddie, the bluff, take it away.
The most important thing for every real estate investor, whether you're a high volume real estate investor or whether you're a guy that does 2 or 3 deals a year, you got to know the data. Now, take advantage of the data, because when I started in the business in 1980, honestly, there wasn't any data. Right? Now we have all kind of information. So let's play a little did you know. Did you know there's 2 million residential mortgages that aren't making a payment? Right? Did you know the most frustrated property seller in the business? Right? Burnout landlords, small-time landlords, particularly ones that self-manage. Do you know how many houses they own? They own almost 12 million residential houses. Right? So that's a big target list. And whether you're looking at that or you're looking at where rates are going or projecting the market conditions, let me warn you of this. A lot of people love to read the headlines. You got to understand what's behind the headlines. Some reporter wrote an article. They wrote a headline for a zinger. The biggest zinger may be details in that article that's way past the headline. Know your data. When you know your data, you can make smart decisions and find voids that, quite honestly, every other real estate investor is missing. I'll talk about strategies that I believe are a big deal. The frustrated landlord, number one reason he doesn't sell, according to some of the top real estate negotiation trainers in the business, friends of Tim's and I, they all tell us the number one reason they don't sell is they're scared of paying taxes. So why don't you angle a tax loophole strategy? Why don't you lead with, instead of I'll pay you top dollar, I'll show you a way to defer taxes. That's a completely different angle that positions you different in the market. But once again, you have to know some data. You have to understand how that works to position yourself differently. Tim, that's about it.
Man, that was good. Data is one of those things. I was an intelligence analyst, right? And so we always talked about single source information. And it was one of those things that you're not supposed to ever take action on, right? If you just heard something in one place or you only got imagery of something, you don't start a battle plan against that, right? You have to go get more information, right? So then if you got imagery intelligence, you'd go look for human intelligence or signals intelligence, or all the different types of information to form a picture. And it's almost what I just heard you say, like, don't read the headline, that's single source. Really get through those articles and look for the underlying data that you can form your own opinion on.
Yeah.
So
it's got to be supported.
Yeah, I mean, so like I read I didn't read. So a couple of months ago, I was at a mastermind meeting. I won't say whose, and someone said the Boise, Idaho market's going to SHIT, and I was like, I hadn't heard that. And I started looking it up, and there's some articles, days on the market up 75%, and it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, it went from 7 to 12, right? Like it's one of those, like, you're like, okay, I mean, I get it, and that's I tell everybody all the time. Is like, percentages right now are really misleading.
That's why I caution against just reading the headlines. I see it all the time. I don't respond on Facebook as much as you do, but I see Facebook. I'm always curious about what people think. What do they say, and why are they saying it? And you're so seasoned. You've been around, you've seen all these cycles like me. You're younger than me, but you've certainly been deep in the space for a long time now and seen these cycles. And the truth of the matter is people are making decisions, and I think, well, the real data tells us one thing. The herd tells us another.
Right.
Like, and so I challenge a real estate investor, are you following the herd, or you're following what the smartest investors in the business are going? The smartest investors in the business, Tim, have a high caution flag up right now.
Right.
They do. Why do they have a high caution flag up? Well, we've had a big run in values. Affordability is a key, and so with affordability is tied to the big thing that everybody's talking about, the big I, which is inflation.
I thought you meant interest rates.
Yeah, well, both of them the big I, right?
Right.
And where is that going? You're a lender. You guys, you got to be market to market.
Yep.
You can't lend below market rates.
Right.
You got to go show people how to do deals in different market cycles.
Right.
Right. There's two ways you can do it. Right. You can either buy cheaper, so that your product, the debt service, doesn't get out of line.
Right.
Or you could do some creative financing in some cases for some piece of the deal that doesn't have significant interest or no interest at all, or maybe it doesn't even have debt service for a period of time. Now you're saying my seller would never do that. He might if he knew that he could defer taxes in a way that he never. You had to show him the idea. He didn't think of it.
Well, and I don't like to talk about pre-2008 strategies I may or may not have used, but one of the things we started doing in the run-up was carrying back seller seconds.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. A lot of them ended up not making payments, but you talked earlier about doing things the right way. The fact that we had them done properly and that we were servicing them properly, almost 90-something% of them ended up paying, and they paid all the interest they owed too. So I think that's one of the ways that people can, maybe if you already own inventory, just keep, you don't have to, if there is a down cycle, it's another, creative financing will help you on both sides of the closing table.
You know, it's funny, like, my phone's ringing off the hook right now, right? Because all of a sudden people have gotten really anxious and knowing that creative financing is a thing. You know, to be honest with you, 6 months ago, I have a herd that's real loyal to kind of what I do. And you know several people within that cycle. But the average person wasn't trying to figure this out. Now all of a sudden the average person starts realizing financial modeling is more important than buy low, sell high.
Right.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
You are king at that, right? You fully understand that it's how you structure the math around the deal. It's not just what you pay. I can pay anything for a piece of property. Just tell me when I got to pay it back.
All right, so we're going to take a break in a second, but when we come back, I want to talk about data.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the early 80s because I agree with you. There's a lot going on right now that just reminds me of that. We'll talk about caution flags, what the average person is doing, a little bit about yields. I just think that's an important conversation for people to have, and ultimately math. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for fast funding for your next fix and flip? What about leverage for your next long-term rental or vacation rental? Need capital for a new construction project? Look no further. RCN Capital has you covered. As the leading nationwide lender for real estate investors, RCN Capital offers short-term and long-term financing solutions for your next investment property. RCN Capital takes a common-sense approach to your loan request, offering high leverages and low rates backed by superior customer service. Whether you're investing in single-family properties or multifamily properties across the U.S., RCN Capital has funding options for you with no hoops to jump through and quick closings in as little as 2 weeks. Ready to get a quote for your next investment property? Visit rcncapital.com/podcast to apply today. There is no fee to apply. Again, that's rcncapital.com/podcast to apply today.
Welcome back to Uncontested Investing. I'm Tim Harridge. I'm still here with Eddie Speed. Eddie, we're going to talk about tax loopholes in just a minute. But I want to talk about the early 1980s. And I really, when I'm around someone as experienced as you, I won't say as old as you, I love to hear about what really happened on the ground in the early 80s, because I've been looking at a lot of the Federal Reserve data and interest rates, property values. You know, a lot of people don't know there was only a 1 year dip in values in like 79, if I remember correctly, and then it just kept going up till 91, and every year was a year-over-year median home increase, even though interest rates spiked. So, if you would talk a little bit about the way this market compares to the early 80s, and then as someone that, I'm giving you a lot to talk about, as someone that has had a lot of problems structuring my tax situation, especially since we took the B2R finance company public last year, I really want to know what people are doing on tax loopholes. So if you would just talk a little bit about the early 80s and then the tax loophole strategy.
Well, when I started in 1980, you got to remember I was a kid. I was 20 years old. So I didn't know anything. My father-in-law and his partner were like ninjas. They really kind of started the seller finance note buying business in the modern day form, right? They weren't the only guys, but they were clearly leaders. And so I just got stupid lucky and fell into these guys, right? That just were geniuses at doing this.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, here's what I remember. Like, the home builders were really screaming. Most of the realtors have been in business for 20 or 30 years, were screaming. When I wouldn't tell you to do this strategy today, but they sent me out to call on home builders and realtors. I just literally would drive from Hattiesburg, Mississippi to the Gulf Coast or Jackson, because people were so forced to carry seller financing. A lot of people had loans. You could just walk in somebody's office, and many times we'd find loans. But they were scared. I mean, you got to remember, interest rates literally were 20%.
Right.
And so people were scared, and my guys just had a bonanza. This is what that showed me. My guys understood how to reinvent themselves. They weren't smarter. The guys that taught me weren't smarter than this home builder who'd been doing it for 30 years, or a realtor that had a brokerage shop for 20 or 30 years. They weren't smarter than them. They just had a position that showed them how to go make something work in a different market. And I believe that era will happen again. You know, this is where I go back to, you can't just follow the herd. You know, what does Warren Buffett say? When people are greedy, be scared. When people are scared, be greedy. Well, don't be greedy, but have a position that's smarter than the rest of them.
Right.
And that's all. That's where I think whatever rates end up being, who knows? But whatever rates end up being, there's going to be terrific opportunity. It's not going to be exactly like it is now. And so we've got to be smarter, and financial modeling becomes a big deal.
And you talk about tax loopholes, and this is a great time to say that I'm not a financial advisor or a tax planner, and neither are you.
Yeah.
But talk about how maybe you could add an element to an offer or a purchase strategy where that tax loophole, so to speak, would be advantageous to the seller.
Well, let's talk specifically about small-time landlords.
Okay.
This is going to be more relevant to them.
So call me Larry the landlord, and I own 8 houses, and I self-manage them all.
That's it. You self-manage. You by definition, and I call them a burnout landlord. I asked a guy a day or so ago, really seasoned guy, I asked a guy a day or so ago, I said, what percentage, he was a high volume real estate investor. He's in the mastermind that you're fixing to go to, right? And I said, what percentage at the kitchen table of the people that meet that definition, I said, what percentage of them are frustrated or burnt out? And I said 60%. And he said, I know, higher than that, 75. Now he was just making up a number.
Right.
That's an incredible number. You're talking about 11 or 12 million properties, and you're saying 75% of those people? I mean, that's a crazy number. So, in other words, your audience listening here, they may have a house, they may be great at managing rentals, because you are, personally, you and I have had that conversation. And I've told you, I said, Tim, you don't represent the normal.
Right.
Right? And so you just got to think in terms of, that's a big market condition. So, because I'm a specialist, I have spent time with what I believe are the best negotiation trainers in the business. There's a couple of different guys. Steve Trang is one. Jerry Green's one.
Trying to get them both on the show.
They're the cats, right? I know who all they train, and they train the biggest high volume guys in the business. And so in talking to them, it kind of led me to what percentage of people don't take your cash offer, or the people you're coaching, they don't take their offer. And they said, well, we probably convert 20%.
So wait, there you go again, using data to
yeah, that leads you to
a strategy, right?
Well, I mean, you're a sports guy.
Absolutely.
Okay, I mean, you don't just get out in the boat in the middle of the lake and just drop your hook, do you?
Throw your spinner bait in the middle of the lake?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Okay, well then, because data says that you know where the fish are, and
right.
all these things are true no matter what we're doing in life, right? So the idea is the biggest percentage of people don't sell. So from that sprung an idea with me. Now, I've been teaching terms buying for a long time, right? I didn't just start this.
No,
right?
You did not.
But what I then got to doing is I started realizing that if you're sending solicitation to somebody and say, sell your house for cash, and they're the 80% that don't want cash because they don't want to pay taxes, I think you got the wrong marketing message.
Right.
So the idea is why don't you try it a little differently? And this is kind of what we teach, is go angle it differently and say, do this. Why don't you take advantage of a tax loophole? Now, I got that language from our president, okay? Because that's what he said he was going to cut out, was all these tax loopholes. And I'm thinking, well, before he gets a chance to cut it out, why don't you take advantage of it? It's so simple. It's so simple, and everybody in real estate that's super seasoned instantly knows that it's all that I'm saying is installment sales.
Yeah.
It's you pay the tax when you receive the money. So if all of the price of the property or part of the price of your property, either one, is you're collecting that money later, then you pay that tax later.
Right.
Right? And by the way, and I'm not a CPA and I'm certainly not giving tax advice, but a lot of your clients, if they can keep their capital gains under $40,000 in a year, a lot of times that capital gains could go away.
Yeah.
No tax on it.
Yeah.
So understand that, like, people are like, whoa. So that's all that it is they want to sell. They're motivated. There's something that needs to take them over the edge, and the tax loophole strategy is kind of the thing.
Well, I think some other things that may take people over the edge right now is we've had massive government interference in the collection of rents.
Yep.
And then property taxes.
No kidding.
Have a lot, because as a landlord, I don't get the benefit of the homestead cap, right, in Texas. I don't get the benefit of exemptions. It's just the unexempt value and whatever they want to appraise it at. And even some of them, like, we've got this house, I mean, we paid like $40,000 or $50,000 for it. It's taxed over $300,000, and I get mad and I want to, like, argue, but then I look at the comps and I'm like, oh, well, they're still $100,000 low. So, but those property taxes and the and no one wants to talk about global warming, but like, there's a lot of hailstorms these days.
Yep.
And my insurance rates are going way up too.
Yep.
So as a landlord, these are other pain points that I'm experiencing.
Well, I laugh and say that for the small-time landlord, I'm not beating up rentals. I want to be clear about that. I know hundreds of people like you, Tim, that manage rentals really well, right? But the truth of the matter is, the hobby is landlord doesn't have systems and processes in place.
Right.
They're smart people. They're smart at what they made a living at every day. They're not taught and trained to do this, and they kind of got hooked on it on HGTV, and it sounded really fun and cool, and all of a sudden then the reality sets in. Here's the problem. The problem is they all have an Excel spreadsheet. They either built one or they were given one. Right, Tim?
That's right.
And then they have a checking account, and they don't talk to each other.
They don't. All right, so we're about to take a break, Eddie, and then we're going to come back and do the Money Minute and Rapid Fire. Anything else to close up these thoughts?
You know, you just got to be constantly looking for a niche. All that I did was I just kept poking around. I'd been teaching these concepts for years, but it was only less than a year ago that the tax loophole deal really set with me.
Because you were talking about tired landlords at my mastermind in early 2020 before COVID appeared.
Yep.
And you were talking about tired landlords. And I was sitting in the audience thinking, I don't know, Eddie. But then when you mix in the tax loophole, like now you have a value add proposition to kind of cross them across the fence.
You just can't give up trying to find every angle that gets you where you want to get. There's nothing that we're making up. The tax loophole strategy is absolutely a truth.
Right. And I think, one of the most important things for the listeners is don't be a one-trick pony. Don't only do owner finance. Don't only do cash sales. Don't only do rentals. Don't only wholesale. Don't only do Airbnb. Explore these niches.
Yep.
Have a lot of arrows in your quiver, because when times get uncertain and a lot of people are screaming, as you said earlier, it just gives you more confidence in being able to execute your business.
One last statement. My father-in-law said something to me when I was a young guy. He said, Eddie, when your living is made on January 1st, then you can really go make a lot of money for the rest of the year.
Amen.
You've been there because you've had rentals, you've owned notes, you've done things to where your income was set for the year with it that didn't force you to have to go chase a deal. Now, you weren't lazy, you went and chased a deal.
Right.
But think in terms of the difference between transactional money and wealth.
Right. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for fast funding for your next fix and flip? What about leverage for your next long-term rental or vacation rental? Need capital for a new construction project? Look no further. RCN Capital has you covered. As the leading nationwide lender for real estate investors, RCN Capital offers short-term and long-term financing solutions for your next investment property. RCN Capital takes a common-sense approach to your loan request, offering high leverages and low rates backed by superior customer service. Whether you're investing in single-family properties or multifamily properties across the U.S., RCN Capital has funding options for you with no hoops to jump through and quick closings in as little as 2 weeks. Ready to get a quote for your next investment property? Visit rcncapital.com/podcast to apply today. There is no fee to apply. Again, that's rcncapital.com/podcast to apply today.
Welcome back to the Uncontested Investing Show. I'm your host, Tim Harris. I'm still here with my good friend and mentor, Eddie Speed. Eddie, the Money Minute. Imagine there's an investor out there. It could be a young, new investor, or maybe a seasoned investor that doesn't really feel quite sure about what's happening in the economy, and they're only going to hear 60 seconds of advice all month. This is it. You've got 60 seconds to give them the best piece of advice that you can think of from your wisdom and experience. Here we go, Money Minute. Kick it off.
Tim, I'll tell you what I did. I went back to advice that I was given when I was a young man, and you reminded me when I did this, what would I tell a young Tim Harris? So here it is. It's really simple advice. There's transactional money and there's wealth. If your transactional income is growing faster than your wealth, you're growing in the wrong direction. You've got to be a wealth thinker. You entered this business because of the opportunities related to wealth, not the opportunities related to having a job. Now, there's nothing wrong with making cash flow. There's nothing wrong with making transactional money. But look at yourself as a person in the business and balance yourself accordingly. Literally take your income, take your net worth, and do a comparison every 6 months and see which one is growing the most. You can easily shift over some transactional income into long-term strategies that grow wealth and get you a check in the mailbox forever. That's my advice.
I absolutely love it, because it's those little nuggets that we hear throughout our career and our life that just make us ultimately the successes that we are or are not, depending on if we listen to it. So you've said a lot I have to unpack here. We've got a couple minutes for rapid fire. Interest rates still going up, or have they plateaued?
No, I think they're going up.
Yep. Inflation, have we beat it?
I don't know anybody that thinks that.
Do you think the Federal Reserve will be able to be unpolitical in handling this mess we're in, or do you think that the politicization of the monetary policy continues?
I think it's going to be political. I think we're foolish to think not. But the truth of the matter is they have a mess. I mean, we're told that we have about 8% inflation, right? Your groceries gone up 8% last year?
No.
Yeah.
Well, wages have gone up 50%, so I don't know how we're really doing with 8. You said earlier, reinvent and not be smarter. Just, what do you mean?
You know, we sometimes get confused the difference between the intellectual, how all the mechanics work, and just looking outside the box. They say, Tim, in most entrepreneurial businesses, the smartest guy is not the founder of the company. In my company, that's certainly true, right? But you do have to be a visionary, right?
So in the Marine Corps, we always said, improvise, adapt, and overcome.
That's it. You got to be a visionary.
Caution flags. You mentioned caution flags earlier. Give me a couple of them.
I think I would be a little bit careful in looking at multifamily. I think there's some great multifamily deals, but they have to be a deal. There has to be true value add. I think there's a lot of multifamily that are financed with variable rate mortgages, and I think that's definitely a caution flag in the market.
Just like the 80s in Dallas.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would say is just make sure that the math is going to work.
You mentioned math. What's the most important math someone can be running today?
I laughed and told a funny story that we all can relate to, because probably every person here has sat in front of a kitchen table with a frustrated landlord and figured out he's some smart guy that's got a spreadsheet, but his checking account doesn't match his spreadsheet.
Right.
Well, that's a truth.
Right.
I don't say that just for humor.
So net operating income.
It's got to be real numbers.
Right.
And and so the guy doesn't load in his $3,500 air conditioner, or he doesn't, it's real numbers.
Right.
It comes out of your checking account. And that's why I think that a lot of people, we've got to be smart about our investing and just absolutely make sure that we are testing it. We're stress testing our deals against real math.
That's right. What is the average person screaming about? It was one of those things you said.
Well, obviously I target the small-time landlord because it's such a big number, and therein lies an opportunity. He bought an investment, but he found out he acquired a job. That's really the real story of it. It's not a job that bothers you. It's a job that bothers a lot of people part-time because they didn't sign up for a job. They just signed up for the investment.
Right. You got to keep it short, but what's the dumbest investment decision you ever made? A note you bought or something?
Yeah. Dolan Springs, Arizona.
Everybody remembers the address, the date. We can make $100,000 on a house and not remember, but man, that one that we lost. What's the most you ever made on a note?
I've made about $1 million on one.
And most you lost?
I've lost a few $100,000 on one.
I won't sit across this table with someone that says they've never lost money in this business, because that means they are not trying hard enough. Yields. When inflation goes up, right? If inflation's 8% and you're not making 8% on your money, you're losing money. Your dollar is devaluing, right?
Yeah.
Yields. What type of yields do people target or get on notes these days?
Well, that market's going to change. It always has. I've been doing it now for 40-something years. And so yields are going to go up. We used to think that about a 10% yield was kind of a bottom-end yield, and now we see people buying at 8. But yeah, with inflation, yields are going to go up. And so notes are going to people are going to look at notes and say, this is a good investment. They're earning the real income. They don't have expenses related to it. And they're going to be able to earn some really good money. And I think double-digit yields are for good quality notes are not going to be abnormal.
Which is what we had years ago.
Yeah.
And it's just, the pendulum,
That's
left
it.
and right. So in the late 70s, it went up to 20% interest did. What I'm seeing is less building, a lot less inventory, which I think if you go back and look, that's kind of what happened in the late 70s, early 80s. There just wasn't anything to buy. So, prices could keep going up. Supply and demand is undefeated, somebody said. Do you think we ever catch up in building houses in this nation?
Well, I mean, we were overbuilt in 2008, and the reason we were is we had a false money market. Right? We were lending money to anybody that could fog a mirror, right? But every time you and I were talking about this, today everybody's comparison is 2008. I don't think the circumstances are the same, right? Let me ask you a question. Other than 2008, in the past 50 years, when have we had 2 million mortgages that weren't paying?
Right now.
Exactly.
But the good news is 98% of them right now have equity. Or 92%, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would say on the defaulted side, that's probably about 30% are underwater and 70% are equitable. So I think those numbers are pretty close to what it is on that side.
So that is one good thing keeping us, because in 08, there was...
Hopefully they sell. Hopefully they don't wait to get foreclosed.
Well, we all know the people the head in the sand and the butt in the air, we can't help people like that. All right, Eddie, man, this is good stuff, and we're almost out of time. Real quick, parting thoughts, parting shots, and how people can get a hold of you and how they can do business with you.
I've got a really cool training on the tax loophole strategy. So it's just noteschool.com/get started. I've got a little book, I've got a little training, and it just gives me a little time to pack a story there. So that should be a good resource.
Okay.
Parting thoughts is I would say that I'm looking at this market optimistically. I'm thinking what I've trained for 40 years is going to have a lot of value in the market. So I'm pretty fired up about finding these niches, continuing to perfect financial modeling strategies that are going to be effective in the market. That's where I'm at.
Well, Eddie, I always learn a lot from you, and I love these notes. So what I'm walking away with is keep paying attention to the data. The data, and don't take the headline news. Really read the article. If you're going to share it or going to soak it in, read the article. I'm going to continue to improvise, adapt, and overcome. I am going to look at some different niches for my investment business and make sure my customers know how to do that too. Continue to monitor caution flags because, the head in the sand is just not a good idea. And I'm going to relook at some creative financing. I think it's been a couple years. I've been the big rent house guy. Even gotten some online arguments about, a note isn't investing because it's a declining income stream with a declining asset base, and a rental house appreciates and it has an income stream. But hey, we're out of time to argue about that, so I'll have to have you come back on some other time.
Let's do it.
Eddie, thank you for being here, man.
Good to see you.
You've been listening to Uncontested Investing. I'm Tim Harridge. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Uncontested Investing Show. Questions about today's episode or the podcast? Email podcast@rcncapital.com and make sure to follow RCN Capital on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. See you all next time. The preceding program is furnished by RCN Capital LLC. The information provided is for general education purposes only and does not constitute any legal, financial, investment, or other professional advice. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed of any speaker are the speaker's own opinion and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of RCN Capital LLC. No information contained in this episode should be construed as financial, investment, or legal advice from RCN or any individual, author, host, or guest. You should always consult a financial advisor before investing.